Happy 2021, everyone. My family and I were reflecting on 2020 the other day, and we were thinking of all the good times, the bad times, the highs and the lows. And as difficult as 2020 has been, we realized all the times that has brought us joy. Some of those moments include multiple hiking trips and finding a new Mexican restaurant with some of the best tacos we've ever had. So that was pretty exciting. And the hiking trips, so much fun. Tab wanted to go explore as many state parks as we could, and we went to so many that I've never heard of, I didn't even know existed. We went also to the Blue Ridge Mountains, the Appalachian Trail, hiked that. Not like we hiked the Appalachian Trail, we might have hiked a mile of it, but yeah, we hiked the Appalachian Trail. Anyway, remembering all that had happened and reflecting on the events of the past, specifically ways that we've seen God move in our lives, is encouraging for us. Even in the midst of schools being shut down, the difficulties, COVID, the medical, there's just so many things that were difficult in 2020. But trying to reflect back and remember how God is still good and faithful can encourage us, even in the midst of difficult circumstances, to continue to move forward and be thankful. See, reflecting is a biblical theme that we can see throughout the Bible, and it's one that's good for us to put into practice on a regular basis. Here are just a couple of passages that talk about God's people reflecting. Joshua 4:9 says, Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priest bearing the Ark of the Covenant had stood, and they are there to this day. Genesis 35:14 says, and Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he had spoken with him, a pillar of stone. Now, why? Why was this important for God's people to remember what God had done in the past? Right? The past is in the past, right? Why is it important? Well, it's as John Piper so deftly states in the title of one of his books, Faith in Future Grace. By remembering God's past grace, we have the courage and we can be confident in his future grace. Well, Samuel from the Bible knew something about this. So kids, if I were to say the word Ebenezer, what comes to your mind? We just came out of the Christmas season, so we may be thinking Ebenezer Scrooge. That's right. Well, this is a different kind of Ebenezer. We find it in 1 Samuel chapter 7. In that chapter, long story short, we see the Israelites up against the Philistines. The Israelites are gathered at Mizpah and they're confessing their sins to Samuel. They knew the Philistines were gathered around them to attack. And quote, the people of Israel said to Samuel, do not cease to cry out to the Lord our God for us, that he may save us from the hand of the Philistines. They recognized that they needed God to save them. And this is the first step for anyone, recognizing we can't do it ourselves. Whether it's salvation, life, whatever it is, the genesis of any victory, any lasting victory, begins with God. So back to the story. As Samuel was crying out to the Lord, well, listen what happens. Verse 10. As Samuel was offering up the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to attack Israel. But the Lord thundered with a mighty sound that day against the Philistines and threw them into confusion, and they were defeated before Israel. And the men of Israel went out from Mizpah and pursued the Philistines and struck them down. So bam, the Lord is victorious. The Lord delivers the Israelites. Time to move on, right? So Samuel just says, everybody pack up, let's go. Not so fast. Samuel recognized the importance of this moment and sets up a monument for the Israelites to always remember what God had done. It says this in verse 12. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shen and called its name Ebenezer and said, till now the Lord has helped us. See, by remembering what the Lord had done, their hearts could be filled with courage and faith when they find themselves in seemingly impossible situations again. There was a hymn written in the 1700s, and the last two lines of it said this: We'll praise him for all that is past and trust him for all that's to come. The monument that Samuel erected served to remind the people of God's answered prayers, so that would encourage them to trust in God's future grace. So for us, this biblical concept of reflecting and remembering, it's important. It's a good thing to do this in our own lives. It's a good thing to do on a regular basis, and especially in a new year, it just makes sense to think back on the previous year. It's just fitting. Because again, when we remember how God has moved and how he is faithful, it gives us courage in future grace, that he will continue to move in the future. So consider what God has done in your life and other people's lives this past year. Let that encourage you for what God will do this next year. Now, if you can't think of anything, or if you're just now considering faith in Jesus and you just don't know how God moves, that's okay. You see, the greatest Ebenezer that we have is the Bible. This book, the Bible, it's God's story. It shows his plan of redemption from eternity past to when everything comes together in glory. This book is full of stories of God's faithfulness and his powerful acts, proving himself to be a God that we can rely on, depend on, and count on. Rely on, depend on, count on. Kids, does that remind you of anything? Does that remind you of a movie? Think Train Ticket, Conductor, Hole Punch. That's right, the Polar Express. Do you remember Billy? At the very beginning of the movie, Billy was so afraid to get on the train. He didn't know if he should or not. He finally takes the plunge, he does it, and he embarks on a journey of a lifetime. And at the end, the conductor punches holes in everyone's tickets to remind them of a valuable lesson that they are to take with them. And it's a magic ticket because when he spins it around, it changes words. It says rely on, depend on, count on. So the conductor asked Billy, "So, can you count on us to get you home safe and sound?" And little Billy answers, "Absolutely. Me and my friends." And why wouldn't he say that? The train, the conductor, that whole situation has done nothing but prove to Billy that they're punctual, they're on time, that they'll get to where they need to go. So he can trust them, rely on them, count on them. So the same goes with us. Based on our experience with God, what we know of God, how we've seen him act in our lives, or how we've seen him act in the Bible, can we count on God to get us home safe and sound? Absolutely. So to get us going this year, to get those stories of God's faithfulness in front of us, so that we will know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Bible is our Ebenezer, our monument displaying his power, his love, his ability to deliver, save, and rescue, I want us all to embark on the first official reading challenge of 2021. You see, a couple months ago, I issued a challenge to read the book of John in a week. It's 21 chapters, 3 chapters a day. Then about a month ago, I issued a challenge to read 7 Psalms. It's a chapter a day. Well, this reading challenge, we are only going to read 1 chapter this week, and it's Hebrews chapter 11. It's known as the Hall of Faith. It's a chapter full of men and women in the Bible who trusted God and lived their lives for him in less than ideal circumstances. When we read those stories, we read of God's goodness and faithfulness. And again, let that encourage our hearts to live for him and trusting him for the impossible. So that's the challenge for this week. Maybe even today, read Hebrews chapter 11. And then even just chapter 12 is awesome because then it turns to Jesus and consider Jesus and all that he's done. So that'll be a bonus. Hebrews 11 is the challenge. Hebrews 12 is the bonus. So the greatest Ebenezer of all time, however, the one that when we reflect on and remember, the one that will shoot courage into our hearts, it's a story about a man who made these crazy, absurd claims. Claims like, destroy this temple and I'll raise it again in 3 days. Or, I must suffer, die, be buried, and on the third day I'll rise again. He made other absurd claims like, therefore I tell you, don't worry about your life, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. So can we really trust this guy? Can we really trust his words about not worrying, but instead seeking God's kingdom first? I would say this. If he did not follow through with his claim that he would rise from the dead, like imagine if I told you that, hey guys, I'm going to rise from the dead in 3 days. You'd be like, Corey, you crazy. And I'd be like, yeah, I am crazy. But Jesus and his words that he said about himself all proved to be true. Therefore, he can be trusted. He can absolutely be trusted. We can trust his words that tell us not to worry. We can trust his words that tell us to seek first his kingdom and everything will be added to us. We can trust him. You see, that story of who Jesus is and what he has done is one that we need to reflect on. I need to reflect on and think on daily. And that will give me courage to live for him in the future because he is one who keeps his promises. We can trust him. When we look back and remember what he has done, whether it be from an Ebenezer moment in our own lives or from stories found in the Bible of God's faithfulness and love, we can find the courage to live for him boldly and faithfully today, throughout the year, and beyond. So again, happy 2021, everybody. Let's reflect back on all that God has done, and let's just remember that he is God and he is one that we can trust and put our faith in, and let that give us courage to live for him in the future. Have a great day, everybody.